Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Philosophy Hour of Literary Tales. In this episode, we're covering the philosophy of love in the great Islamic philosopher, Avicenna. Avicenna is one of the most important Islamic philosophers of all time. He is also one of the most famous Islamic Neoplatonists. He is, like Augustine to the Christian tradition, sometimes considered the great philosopher of love, because of his importance of love in his thoughts. And we will unpack the basic philosophy of love from his great and influential treatise on love. Avicenna opens by declaring that all that has been created have a telos and strive for that end, which is their perfection. There is a goal to which all life strives for. And that striving towards perfection and goal is the love that is embedded in them. Thus, according to Avicenna, love is the driving force to perfection. For without love, we would cease to be. We would cease living, striving to that goal for which we are made. That said, the issue of love is not one of hylomorphism, as it is in the Augustinian Christian anthropology, but one of a gradual progression of supersessions. That is, love is the first spark, so to speak, on the path toward intellectual actualization. This is where Avicenna is, in fact, far more Neoplatonic than even the Neoplatonic Christian tradition. For, as we will see, Avicenna's highest understanding of love, which is in the souls of humans, is intellectual love. Nevertheless, for, as Avicenna says, it is in the material world that we find the earliest origins of love, but we also find evil within it. It is the attachment to the material world in which we sink into evil. And again, readers of Plotinus will immediately see the Plotinian Neoplatonic influence over Avicenna. But as we move away from the purely material world and we look up into higher realms and levels of existence, that is the spark of love, which unites all things and brings us to higher levels of understanding and existence. We can think of this understanding as a ladder. Love is the first step. It is at the beginning. It begins in the corporeal material world. But as we desire to reach the top of the ladder, perfection, we will inevitably leave the first step, the corporeal world, behind us and find pure bliss in the realm of the purely intellectual and the transcendental. That, again, is the highest form of love, and that is love perfected, intellectual love of God, of the cosmos, of wisdom, of knowledge. Avicenna also links love with the good and the pleasing. This has bodily ramifications, but this is also intentional on his part. For the experience of the good and pleasing gives us a foretaste of what perfected love and happiness is like, pure contentment and pleasure. Thus, it is from this phenomenological experience that, ideally, the soul is to be perfected as it comes to know the source of perfection, who is God. Therefore, Avicenna concludes that love permeates all things, including matter, and is the gateway to the good and pleasing, and therefore the gateway to God. And the minimal love that we do find in the material world, the pleasure that we gain from it, causes us to think about why this is good and why this is pleasing. And thus, matter is connected to intellect. For when we begin to think about the good and the pleasing that we are experiencing in the material world, we begin the next step up that ladder towards intellectual love. One of the most controversial claims of Avicenna, bordering on pantheism of sort, is that he claimed that love is even in inanimate entities. Again, love is found even in, say, a rock or a pebble. Avicenna claims that since God created everything, God's love must be in all things. This is because all things in nature shy away from non-being, as he says. And in their shying away from non-being, they seek perfection, the prerequisite for perfection, which is found in love. Then we move to love in the vegetative soul. The vegetative soul is not from Avicenna. It is found in Greek philosophy, and again, Avicenna was widely read in Greek philosophy, especially the writings of Plato, Plotinus, and Aristotle. Avicenna, following from this Greek understanding of the vegetative soul, concludes that since vegetative souls have the faculty of procreation, which is indicative of love existing within them, then the vegetative soul must have a higher form of love than purely inanimate objects, say like again, the pebble or the rock. For plant life has the ability to reproduce itself, and in the ability to reproduce, that reproduction is a reflection and embodiment of love itself. And therefore, the reproductive part of even the human soul is a manifestation of love. So the vegetative soul, though it is not noble-minded, has love within it. For love existing in the vegetative soul, the reproductive aspect of life, is itself a manifestation of love. For love brings things together and produces new life. Moving forward from the vegetative soul, Avicenna begins his discussion on love in the animal soul. The animal soul includes love, which stems from the faculty of procreation and desire that is established in his preceding propositions about the vegetative soul. The animalistic soul, therefore, is about the emotional response, the basic awareness, as well as sense perception, the ability of the animal soul to feel, to have awareness, to have sense perception, and therefore to feel and experience love and have the first origins and the inklings of beginning to understand love means that love is foundational to the animal soul. Because the animal soul is appetitive, it is the appetite of the soul, of the individual, of life itself, that appetite within the animal soul, again, the ability to have emotions, feelings, awareness, sense perception, when taken together, lead to the origins, the very primitive origins of noble-minded love. And thus we get to Avicenna's next proposition, his next great movement up the ladder of love and life, which he terms noble-minded love. Noble-minded love emerges within the human soul, for it is in the human soul that we begin to understand conceptualization, drawn from those feelings, emotions, experiences, and awarenesses that are found in the animal soul. Again, for Avicenna, the human is unique in that it has all aspects of the Greek soul. There is the vegetative part, which is the reproductive aspect of the human soul. There is the animalistic part of the human soul, which is our ability to feel, to have emotions, to have sense perceptions. And then there is the intellectual aspect of the soul. And this is where noble-minded love comes into play. For noble-minded love is all about having love within it, the drive to move forward in life, the drive to have understanding in life. Human love is the actualization of voluntary love within the animal soul brought to fruition at an intellectual level. We freely choose to exhibit and embody love to another as the highest expression of that noble-minded love, because noble-minded love is all about understanding. It is our movement away again from the purely material, the emotional, and into the intellectual. Noble-minded love is the first step into the intellectual realm, according to Avicenna, because noble-minded love foundationally is about the unity of love with understanding, love and the intellect. This is including all of our sense perception, sexual intercourse, our vegetative and animal soul united, now leading us to an understanding of what it really means to have and experience love. We begin to understand that the vegetative aspect of love is the sexual drive, and it is about procreation. Thus, we are linking the vegetative reality of love with the intellectual understanding of love. We begin to understand, according to Avicenna, why we have the vegetative part of love within us. Likewise, we begin to come to know and have an appreciation for sensory experiences and perception. Beauty, for instance, this great gift of sense perception bestowed by God to creation, which we can see and experience. We begin to understand what the totality of beauty is, and that beauty is an expression of love and interconnectedness. Thus, we begin to have a movement away from the purely animalistic into a higher understanding of it, because we are now beginning to embody, promote, and conceptualize our sense experiences, our animal love, our emotions, our ability to understand what it means to have two human beings coming together in pleasure. Thus, we know from Avicenna that the animal aspect of love is now again tied to the intellectual, because we are intellectualizing and conceptualizing our experiences. This leads to what Avicenna calls nobility and refinement. And through nobility and refinement, our intellectual understanding of love unites us with those lower realities of love, or better understood, we are lifting the lower realities of love into the intellectual. And thus you can again see how Avicenna's philosophy of love is one of progress and supersession. We have been moving from the material, the inanimate, to the vegetative, to the animalistic, and now into the intellectual. And as we move into an intellectual understanding of love, this brings us closer to God. And this is where Avicenna reaches his final conclusion about love. Love of the divine. Love of divine souls. So the divine soul, be they human or angelic, have no claim whatsoever to divinity if they do not acquire knowledge of the absolute good. That is what Avicenna states, because ultimately humans and angels are not divine. Only God is truly divine. And understanding that we are not divine, that matter is not divine, but only God is divine, is the highest understanding of love within divine souls. We recognize our place within the cosmos, and we recognize the source of all intellect, all truth, all goodness, all beauty, and ultimately all love. True love is intellectual rather than just phenomenological. That is, true love means that you need to have an understanding, and it is in the understanding of love that you reach completion. Now, this does radically differ from the conceptions of love found in Augustine and then later Thomas Aquinas, which is all about the unity of the two. But Avicenna argues in the treatise on love that to know the absolute good is to know one's nature, and to know one's nature is to know what love is about, because love is your nature. And once you know your nature is love, you have achieved perfection, because perfection is not about the bodily or the material, it is about purely the intellectual. This is why Avicenna closes by stating the true aim of love of divine souls, human or angelic, is an understanding of the pure good, and the pure good is only offered in God. Thus, the aim of love, as we can now see according to Avicenna, is ultimately knowledge of God. This is made possible through the relations we sought from the earlier realities of love, the relation of mind and body, through sensation, the relation of being indivisible with another human being, the union of a man and a woman in love, which is the highest manifestation of our loving existence. Thus, Avicenna has argued that deep within creation itself is this yearning for knowledge, which is a manifestation and expression of love, and it begins in inanimate objects, it moves to the vegetative reality of creation, then the animalistic reality of creation, and then to the intellectual part of creation. And of course, Avicenna, being a good humanist, understands and promotes that it is only humans that possess the intellectual soul. He is following Greek philosophy here. Nevertheless, the straight path, according to Avicenna, is the road to perfection through an understanding of love. All of our desiring from love, our drive for love, and our experience of love is meant to bring us an understanding of love. And when we understand love, we gain perfection, because understanding love is fundamentally about understanding God. Thus, the conclusion of Avicenna's treatise on love is that the perfection that love brings is ultimately perfect knowledge of love itself. And love itself is the absolute good, and the absolute good is God. And by coming into a union with the absolute good, with God, you have achieved perfect knowledge and perfection of nature.